The internal work, after the physical transition, or maybe before the physical transition, the internal work that has to happen for you to really find happiness. It is probably, for me, it was by far the most difficult part of my transition. What does it look like? What does it feel like? For me, it was a lot of moving towards self love. I had spent a lot of my life hating myself, hating who I was, how I presented in the world, how people perceived me. I always thought of myself in ways that were negative. I believed everything was my fault. I did a lot of destructive things. Destructive, not necessarily outwardly destructive, but destructive in terms of fighting against my transition. For example, as I was losing my hair, I was like, cool, I don't care, whatever, I'm going to just do it because I felt that I would force myself to get stuck in that pre transition phase. So, working towards self love, working towards changing the belief of what your limitations are as a person. Um, I believe that I could not transition because I was too old. I was too tall. I was too muscular. I was all of these things that physically that were going to make it impossible for me to live a happy life. The internal side of it was very different. I did not love myself, and I believed that everything inherently was something that I was either at fault at, and I could not escape my own destiny, the one that I was born into. As I started to transition and started to see the possibilities of what could be, not the fears of what I couldn't possibly be, and started seeing how the possibilities were open and how the opposite, the fears and the anxieties, were closed. I couldn't do this. I couldn't do that. I couldn't be happy. I couldn't transition. I couldn't possibly ever find happiness on the other side of my transition, I thought. And so I created all of these self limiting beliefs, beliefs that had nothing to do with reality. They were beliefs that I put in place in front of me to block me from moving forward. Um, of course, by doing so, I forced myself backwards, forced myself to not transition. And I spent 42 years believing that I could not be happy on the other side, even though I knew I wasn't happy on this side, on the other side of transition, pre-transition. So I physically transitioned. That's why I called myself almost instant Victoria, because I was like, okay, let's do this. Let's get this thing on the road and let's start this transition. So I started doing it, and I started moving towards myself, and I started believing slowly that maybe there was happiness on the other side of a transition. How did I remove these self-limiting beliefs? I think the initial answer is always going to be self-love. It's a journey of self-love, but that journey of self-love requires a journey of self-discovery, because I had placed a mask uh, that protected me from the external world. It's almost like I wrote a book, and the book was Victor. And if someone insulted Victor, I didn't care. It was like, who cares that you're insulting this person that I created? Whatever. I had no vulnerability in that person. It didn't matter what other people's opinions were of him, because he wasn't me anyways. So that lack of vulnerability was great, because it allowed me to live my life internally, and externally I was free from the opinions of other people and the opinion of myself, really, because I didn't have any vulnerability. And so self discovery was maybe the first step towards self love. And actually, it was the second step. The first step was the unmasking. How do we discover who we are? First, we have to let go of the mask of who we pretended to be. So, how do you do that? I mean, how do you let go of the mask? Physically, I started physically transitioning. But internally, how did I figure out how to let go of things that I held as intrinsically part of me? And so, for example, let's do the emotions one. Pre-transition, I never cried. I actually prided myself that I had only cried one or two times in my life as an adult. That's insanity. Why would you pride yourself on being emotionally unavailable if it wasn't to prove to myself that I was not that person? And then unmasking that was saying, hey, wait a second. Are you really unemotional? Are you really unable to cry? Or have you chosen not to cry because that was the part of the mask that kept you safe? And so changing that limit and saying, hey, wait a second, I know that that's not true. I know I have emotional capacity. I just have not allowed that part of myself to come out. And so some of that has to be done consciously. Some of it happened internally after I consciously allowed myself to, I gave myself the ability, or did I just allow myself to do it? I always had the ability to cry. I always had the ability to have emotions. But finally, I gave myself the license to step into it. Because before that, I had been so scared. If you cry, then this, and this. And now I was like, actually, maybe I can cry, and maybe it's okay for me to cry. And maybe it's okay for me to show my emotions, and finally giving myself, stop limiting myself in effect and allowing myself to do so. And then doing it once and being like, wow, that was actually very cathartic. Crying. I felt free, free to be myself. And so unmasking and then discovering that I was, in fact, able to do so. And it actually gave me the confidence to take another step of self discovery, being like, hey, wait a second, I actually, I like this part of myself. I like that I have the capacity to have empathy and emotions and crying, and I can cry in good ways too. I watched that commercial and that kitten did something really cute, and I loved the way they loved each other, and I could cry from that. And I was like, wow, that's kind of cool. I didn't even know that was a possibility before. And then seeing that thing and being like, wow, I really like that. I liked how I was, had so much more capacity for emotions, and I have so much more in me than I believed that I had in me. And as I started discovering myself, I started seeing really great things, and I started seeing things that I needed to work on. I had to I had to start seeing myself as a full person, a person with good parts and a person with bad parts, and a person with all of these things that make us whole. And as I discovered more and more about myself, I started loving me again, maybe for the very first time, or maybe since I was a very young child when all of the things were possible. And that journey of unmasking and then self discovery and then self love really allowed me to see how much more I was than I ever allowed myself to think that I was. And that work, without doubt, any doubt in my mind, is the transformation that really brought me towards myself and really got me to see myself in a way that I had never imagined seeing myself in that way. So I was now seeing all of Victoria, all of the wonderful things and all of the terrible things, and seeing myself as a whole person and actually loving me and loving myself. And that self love has transcended me in a lot of ways because once I had self love, then I could love somebody else. And before that, I couldn't love the way I love now. And I got lucky and I found a partner who sees me and sees the real me. And I see the real her and I love the real her. And it has allowed me to see things in ways that I couldn't have imagined seeing them before I started transitioning and before I could see myself and before I loved myself and before I could love another person. And now, kind of like this next stage is really loving others in even when they don't love themselves. And that internal work, that piece of finally loving yourself and seeing yourself in the whole way, not just externally. Like, I love myself outside. Some days yes, some days no. um, I'm getting older. As I get older, things will start falling off, and my arm will just like disintegrate. Oh, I mean, hopefully not. But um, that internal thing, that internal love, I don't know if that's ever going to go away. Because I think it's the piece that I think I will always hold on to. So if you're on a journey of self-discovery and self-love, and um, I say go for it with reckless abandon, because it is the thing that will take you through for the rest of your life. Bye, everybody.